This is Richard Clarke with Hot Science, with the week's top news in science, technology, and medicine. And I'm going to start again with that little poem that I had ChatGPT write about our hot science thing. I'm not going to let it run all the way through, though.
On Zoom, we gather for Hot Science with Clarke to explore discoveries that leave us in awe. From technology to medicine, we embark and delve into the world with curious rapport.
Anyway, that's enough of that, but it still amuses me. And you know that the voice there is also an AI voice, because I didn't want to have to use my voice to read the AI poem. It seems like having an AI reader is appropriate. Anyway, I'm just playing. And I don't have telescopes or stuff like you have to play with, Daryl. So I just have to play with AI over the internet. Okay, so today's story, to give a rundown of what we're going to talk about, first, as the top story, I have another AI story. These are the jobs that are most vulnerable to AI, researchers say. And in technology, yet another AI story. This is about a young woman, Indian college student, who's an engineer in school, and she developed an AI model that translates American Sign Language into English text. And in the environment, everyone should be concerned. Antarctic sea ice reaches the lowest levels ever recorded. In materials, the story is of a new room temperature superconductor, which offers tantalizing possibilities. And in space, the James Webb Telescope discovers enormous distance galaxies that shouldn't exist, according to what we think. I guess we're going to have to change what we think. And in biology, now there are a dozen exotic bacteria that are found to passively collect rare earth elements from wastewater. So we have a new way to mine for rare earth elements using cyanobacteria. And in the human story is 6 ways the lives of girls are different today than they were a decade ago. And finally, in health, a cardiologist reveals the top 10 heart symptoms you should never ignore, but many people do. And I thought for us, it's worthwhile going through those. So maybe we won't ignore them, or we won't ignore them as much, or something. Okay, so on with the show. And this is for people who are wondering about what AI is going to do to the job market, because AI is literally designed to model human capabilities. And because of this, it can automate human tasks. And so it's a fair question of what's this going to do to jobs? And so researchers used an interesting methodology that I'll talk about in a bit. And they found that this study said the top occupations that are going to change due to language models include telemarketing and a variety of post-secondary teachers, such as English and literature teachers, foreign language and history teachers. And they find the top industries exposed to advances in language modeling are legal services and securities, commodities, and investments. Now, one of the things that is interesting about these professions that they're talking about is so far, ChatGPT is notoriously bad at providing factual information. So I'm not sure how good a teacher it's going to be. And then also, Chat is very bad at math. So if you want an investment advisor that can't add 2 and 2, ChatGPT is just the thing for you. And they used a methodology in which they did an estimation on occupations that had changed the most in AI advances between 2010 and 2015. So still the early days of AI. And then from that, they mapped 10 areas where AI was advancing, things like image recognition and speech recognition and language modeling and strategy games. And they mapped those to 52 abilities used in occupations. And then they came up with what they called an AI occupational exposure score, an AIOE. And the higher the score, the greater the risk that automation is going to take over the industry. And educators in this rank highly because AI can change the way that teachers work and assign work and detect cheating or use the programs to develop teaching materials. But again, AI is currently very, very bad at teaching history. So they're going to have to figure out some way to have AI give what is actual information instead of just making things up to answer the question. Otherwise, it's not going to be a very good teacher. Now, telemarketers, while on one hand, there's a compelling case to be made for human AI collaboration, the dynamics of the workplace will probably mean, though, that humans are just going to be replaced. And in fact, bosses have already started to replace their employees with AI. You know, the argument about working together, though, is actually a strong one. Maybe if you're going to have a high-priced product, you have AI help your telemarketer, and it can help the telemarketer by analyzing their responses in real time and then having the AI look for customer-specific prompts to be fed to the telemarketer. So in that way, your AI could enhance the human telemarketer. But what's going to happen in most places is the humans are just going to be replaced by these language modeling tools that can have a simple conversation and get you to sign up for their product or something. So this is one of the kind of mini analyses that we'll be seeing about the impact of AI on jobs. It's certain there will be an impact It's just nobody knows yet what it's going to be. Any comments from you guys? I know you're not worried much about the job market.
No.
Maybe you can explain, Richard, why is AI bad at teaching history and math when they're both just factual based things?
But the way that AI is, the way this large language modeling thing works is they fed it like a trillion words off the internet. And when it responds based on the probability of what word is going to be next, rather than what is the facts, ma'am. So it doesn't know the facts. So it's a word predictor model. And the word predictions depend on the kind of information that it has been fed. And so far, they haven't figured out how to feed it information where it can be relied on to give generally known facts.
I have a feeling that in 5 years, this will be solved.
Oh,
Maybe less than 5.
I think so too. One of the areas where it has to be pushing it is they're trying to use them as a replacement or augmentation for Google and the Google search. And what you'd want to do if you're searching for something is to be able to depend upon the results of the search being meaningful. And, the guys in AI research talk about a phenomena that they call hallucination, where the AI just makes up stuff. And so putting it out in Bing and putting it on Chrome, they're going to have to deal with that and figure out how to deal with it. When they deal with it, though, I think it's a deep problem because you can't deal with it by putting something on top of the model just to use it in special ways. The problem is deep enough that you have to figure out some other way to train the AI. And maybe you train it, instead of giving it everything you can find on the internet, you give it curated data that you've made sure what you train it with is actually data rather than dumping in everything you can find. I know that's one of the things. There is at least one company that now is in business developing curated data sets to train your AI with.
So last week I signed up for a Chat GPT account, and I started to play around with it. I asked it to describe some deep space objects, and it actually did pretty good. It came back with some good information.
Right. I've been using it now for a month in these meditation classes that I give. I usually give a talk. And, one of the things I talk about are subjects related to mindfulness. And there's been an enormous amount published about mindfulness. So ChatGPT knows it pretty well. I still have to read it carefully because it doesn't know it as well as I do. And it says some things that I can recognize. I will say it, that's not the way I would teach it. And if it's important, you have to make sure if you're teaching that you're teaching good stuff.
Sure. I mean, you got to read it over and edit it.
Right. But still, for example, when I asked it, I was thinking about what I can do to make some of the YouTube stuff, make more YouTube stuff and attract more eyeballs. Then I asked it on one of these meditation subjects, give me 100 ideas for different things that I could talk about. And it gave me a good list, and it absolutely is stuff that is worth thinking about. And it came up with things that I wouldn't have thought of. So again, I see genuine utility for me anyway in the creative process that I go through. And in the creative process I go through, it really provides a boost.
Yeah, I plan on using it more and more, investigate it more, and hopefully, like we said, it's going to get better and better.
Right. And now one of the things I use it for, I've learned on YouTube videos, you can get a transcript. If they have closed captions available, you can also, there's some other button you can see that gives you a transcript. Now there are YouTube add-ons that'll give you the transcript in longer blocks. It's still not capitalized or punctuated though. And so what I've found is I can take and copy that long unbroken block and put it in ChatGPT and say, ChatGPT, act as an English editor, make sentences, punctuate and capitalize this, and what I copied from the page, and then it'll give me the text from the page, nicely formatted, and most of the time I agree with what it thinks are sentences and stuff like that. So for me, that also is handy, because one of the ways I get information is from these videos, but I have better and faster comprehension reading than I do listening. When they're talking, they're 80 or 100 words a minute. When I'm reading, it's several times that speed. And since I've been reading since I'm 10 years old, my reading comprehension is actually pretty good. And so I'd rather read it than listen to it often if I can. And, some of the stuff I want to study and to be able to get written words so I can look at it more slowly is also real useful for me.
Good.
Anyway, it's just more stuff, and I'm happy with this generation of stuff because from the beginning I can figure out ways to use it in my life that seem worthwhile. Now, the next story is a story of one of these young software engineers. This particular one is a woman from Tamil Nadu, Priyanjali Gupta, and she's an engineering student in Tamil Nadu in their Vellore Institute of Technology, and she's created an AI model that can translate American Sign Language into English in real time, and she's a third-year computer student. Here, let me see if I can find it. Is that it? Yes, this is it. I will find her. I don't know what's happening with my mice. Okay, here, I almost had it. Excuse me while I. Okay, I'll try again. Here she is. And you see her there. She said, hello, I love you. Oh, I love you too. Yes, I do. And it's interesting, they give probabilities with it. And you can see sometimes the probabilities are not 100%. Sometimes they're pretty low. So let me come back. Okay. So she was challenged. She got this idea last year, and she was thinking about developing something while she was in school, and she told her mother about it, and her mother taught it her, she said, but it made me contemplate what I could do with my knowledge and skills. And then one day, amid conversations with Alexa, the idea of an inclusive technology struck her, and that started this idea. And, she's just doing it on one platform, I think her cell phone platform, though it doesn't say. It turns out computer scientists are trying to figure out how to do the same thing that she's doing, and doing it in a generalized form that would sit PC and Apple platforms and cell phones and stuff like this. And they're working on it. And, it's the kind of thing that will be real useful. And to have these kind of tools break down walls of communication between people, I think are enormously valuable contributions. And it makes me realize that the age of being separated by differences in language, maybe some of that is going to be coming to a close. Already there are things where you can speak into your phone, give it to the next person, and he can punch a button and hear it in his language. So you can have interrupted conversations between different people with different languages now already. And I wonder when we're going to see that on our cell phone and things like this, and what a wonderful thing to be able to speak to people more broadly. I know that's the kind of thing that I can imagine will unleash another level of creativity around the world.
Right. I thought that was very interesting, how it to me, it worked pretty well. I mean, I really could see how this could really help someone. The other issue is, I wonder if she could reverse it and say, like, if
right,
I need
English to ASL, yes,
right, and so you'd have a conversation
and have some little avatar waving their hands and fingers around.
Right.
I also wondered the same thing, because you want to make the communication two-way.
Yep.
Now, she also, it sounds like, as I read the article, she just has a small vocabulary so far. So a lot of work still has to be done, but I would think if you want to have a beta demonstration from a third-year college student, I think I would give her an A.
I agree.
And ask her to be my TA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So the next story is an environmental story, and I'm afraid this is not an environmental story that is very positive. And the headline says, everyone should be concerned. Antarctic sea ice levels reach the lowest levels ever recorded. And though it didn't say this in the article, I wondered, well, just how much of the fresh water is locked up in this Antarctic ice? So I asked Google, not ChatGPT, but something I can trust like Google, this question. And it says the Arctic ice is about 60% of the world's total fresh water and about 90% of the world's surface fresh water is held in these Antarctic ice sheets. And if they all melted, this would create about a 70-meter rise in the global sea level. So a 200-foot rise in the sea level would cause problems everywhere, way beyond the scope and bounds of anything that they're presently considering. So for the last 44 years, satellites have helped scientists track how much ice is floating on the ocean around Antarctica. And what they see this year is there has never been less ice around the continent than was there last week. It wasn't even a close thing. And here I have an image, if I can get it up. This was an image comparing February of 2022 and February of 2023 compared to the long-term average. And the colors indicate how long the ice was in that area and kind of the time extent of the heat on the ice sheet. And where it's red, the ice was there less long and went back, and you can see a lot of that is red. So that's a problem, and it's a problem that's pretty significant. And it turns out that starting in about 2016, the ice levels started to really go back to recede and to be noticeable. And it's a little bit of a complicated story because melting sea ice doesn't directly raise sea levels much because it's already floating on water. And it's the kind of side effects of the melting of the sea ice that's a problem. Sea ice helps buffer the effect of storms on ice attached to the coast, and increased wave action can weaken these floating ice shelves. And these floating ice shelves are the things that stabilize the massive ice sheets and the glaciers behind them on land. And it's this ice that is not floating on water that is, when it melts, that's the stuff that raises the sea level. And so it's not the floating ice melting that is the problem, but rather it is continental ice shelves and continental ice that this floating ice protects that is the problem. And the major concern right now is with the loss of life around Amundsen and Bellinghausen seas on the Antarctica's west coast. This is important because this region is home to the vulnerable Thwaites Glacier. This glacier already is known as the Doomsday Glacier because it's so vulnerable and it holds enough water to raise sea level by 0.5 meter. And so it's the most vulnerable part of it, and the stuff that's protecting it is being melted now. And they're still not sure, but they are almost sure that what they're seeing is the signs of global warming and the retreating of the CI based on this. This is what all the models are saying is going to happen, and this is what they are seeing happening, and it has been happening at an accelerated rate since 2016. The scientists say we're still trying to get grips on what's different now, but it's clear that the reduced sea ice will have an impact. And so everyone should be concerned about what's happening in Antarctica. Similar things are happening in the Arctic as well. And so the warning system of the climate and ice on the poles, I would say, are flashing red. Problem ahead, put on the brakes. Meanwhile, Biden just approved a giant oil drilling project in Alaska. I'm not sure that's going in the right way. Anyway, comments from you guys?
I noticed that it was interesting that I found out for really the first time that I recall anyway, that the ice is melting from climate change, but it's melting from the bottom up. It's melting because of warmer ocean.
Yes.
And so it's not so much top down, it's bottom up melting.
Right. And the article says that, on the top, ice is very reflective. Yeah. And so because it's reflective, it doesn't heat up from the sun's rays. And so you got to get it from the bottom.
Right.
Yep.
I read an interesting concept where they drilled on the glacier to stop the glacier from moving. They drilled hundreds of holes in the glacier and inserted water or hydrogen or something that would freeze immediately when it hit ground level. And they were doing that to stop the glacier from moving. This was the science fiction.
It's interesting if they're actually doing it. So they're using water and making ice rebar to stabilize the glaciers.
Right.
Interesting. These guys are so clever, when they use our brain power for something that is useful, it's amazing what we can do. Now, Daryl, I hate to say it, but it looks like you have a cross between a halo and a hat.
It looks like a halo. And I know Daryl.
It's the brightest halo I've ever seen.
I know Daryl very well, and he deserves that halo.
Okay.
Yes. Very angelic.
Very good. Now, at the last house I had, my office was in a room where there was a one of these Mexican skylights, and I had to go up and hang a towel over it because if I was there in the middle of the day, the skylight came up and lit up all my gray hair. So it looked like I had not as good a halo as Daryl, but more than I would find acceptable. And I know if my wife ever saw it, she would laugh me out of town. Anyway, back to the science. Now, I have another material story, so you guys, I'll wake you up when it's over, or we'll go beep or something. And in a packed room last week, the American Physical Society at their annual meeting, a physicist from the University of Rochester announced that he and his team had achieved something that they had been trying to do for a century, which is to develop a superconductor that worked at room temperature and, quote, near room pressure. I'll talk about the actuals there a little later. And the results appear to show that a conventional conductor, a solid made of hydrogen, nitrogen, and the rare earth metal lithium, were transformed into a flawless material capable of conducting electricity with perfect efficiency. That's the superconductor. And this was greeted with wild enthusiasm by some scientists, and others are far more cautious because this same research group announced a near room temperature superconductor about a year ago and then found something was flawed and they withdrew their announcement. So there are a lot of people who don't believe them because of their previous flawed announcement. And, before this, superconductivity has only been observed at extremely low temperatures or crushing pressures. And if this turns out to be correct, it's probably the biggest breakthrough in the history of superconductivity. So that's a pretty strong statement. And the new study demolishes all the past records. Now, when they were making the samples, one of the things they used is a diamond anvil that can compress the samples to 2 gigapascals of pressure. 1 Pascal is about 1 atmosphere, so that's about 2 million atmospheres of pressure, which is kind of severe. And when they made hundreds of samples and were able to observe superconductivity in dozens of them. So it wasn't all the time, and it wasn't an extraordinary high yield, but the yield was a lot higher than 0. And they were able to get dozens of samples. And even when they lowered the pressure to merely 1 gigapascal, and that 1 gigapascal is about 10,000 atmospheres, so it's still a pretty high pressure environment if you ask me. But they found it has all the right measurements, the drop in resistance. There's a magnetic measurement that only happens when there is superconductivity, and so they got all the right measurements. And supporters are saying that this demonstration is a tour de force of every kind of measurement you'd want to see in this material, producing exactly the kind of data that you would hope to see. But again, they're under extreme scrutiny because of the previous research that they released. And even though they tried to confirm it, this article was more peer-reviewed than almost anything in the history of this kind of work, and it passed all those peer reviews. And they say you can either believe the evidence or not, but you can't ignore it. And one of the researchers say the discovery of this new lutetium material is remarkable and an important milestone. However, what's going to happen is this is going to have to be confirmed by another lab and other researchers before it's widely accepted. And it turns out there are only a handful of labs in the world who can work with this incredibly high diamond anvil pressures that are needed. So confirming this isn't going to be simple, but if it's confirmed, then superconductivity will have taken a significant step forward. Still, if you have to operate under the 1 gigapascal of pressure, then that's still a barrier that's going to keep it from very broad usage, because maintaining that kind of pressure is not a small job. But it's going to make your telescopes better, Daryl.
Yeah, I don't really understand the area very much.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know it.
Yes, I understand. As I've been reading these articles, I've tried to come to understand it better, and it still has to do with kind of parallel lines of electrons getting just in the right position to move around freely without any resistance. And apparently that's tricky. And one of the reasons that it's tricky is that under normal conditions, electrons repel each other. So to get them to all line up neatly is tricky.
Yeah, I never tried it, so I don't know.
Right, me neither. At this one, I feel like ChatGPT. I'm just trying to understand this text that I read.
Right.
But I don't know. Okay, so continuing along, we have another special for those that are like the universe, and the James Webb has discovered more things. These are enormous distant galaxies that they say just shouldn't exist. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here we are. Okay. This is almost it. Okay, here we are. And if you see in these 6 pictures, there are those 6 little red dots. And those 6 little red dots are each galaxy roughly the same size as our galaxy. And one of the things that is interesting is, they're very old, they're very far away, but if you look, they're red, and nearby you see in some of the pictures some blue ones. And the thing is that stars, when they're new, using hydrogen, burn hot and burn with blue light. And as the stars get old, then they cool down and burn with red light. So the galaxies that are big galaxies burning with a lot of red light, the stars seem to be older than they know they ought to be, and the galaxies are bigger than they thought they would be. All the models said you would find galaxies that are in this period, which is only 500 to 700 million years after the Big Bang. They expected to find galaxies, but they expected to find them smaller and that they would be bluer. These are hundreds of times bigger than the galaxies they expected to find, and a lot redder than they expected to find. And so the astronomers have a problem with their cosmology. They are saying, though, before they start rewriting all their cosmological theories to explain how these galaxies came together so quickly, they have to make sure that these odd red dots they're looking at are not something else. The only problem is as they think about what else they might be, those explanations still require entirely new concepts and new physics. So whatever they do, their approach looks like it needs to be revised. And to me, it is fascinating that so early after the web got going, that they got this kind of information that made them have to stop and think and reevaluate their basic theories of how the universe works. Oops.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they thought when the web, before even the web was launched, that it was going to do this. It was going to change people's theories. There was so much science potential in the instrument that it was going to do this. And guess what? It's doing it.
Yes.
It's working.
Uh-huh.
I thought's interesting about the photographs is those galaxies from the web are like 10 pixels big in the camera. And,
oh my God. Okay.
And it's like we need a bigger and better instrument than web to see more now.
To get better resolution. Okay.
Right. It was amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
And but they're still, even with those 10 pixels, able to identify many things. And they said next they're going to turn spectroscopy on it, which says what elements are in those guys.
Right. This was done with their infrared camera, wasn't it?
Yeah, the near infrared.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so next we're going to find out what's in those galaxies.
Uh-huh.
Early galaxies.
That'll be fascinating. They also said that with the near infrared camera, what it's very good at is estimating distances. Right. So their understanding of the age of these objects is good.
Right. And they're just bizarre because what makes them red when they're so young?
Right. If they're that young, there is going around in the circles that I read, there are these guys that are heretics questioning the Big Bang. And there's another guy somebody who says that blank energy, I forget what they call it.
Can't come up with it.
Dark energy.
Yes. Anyway, that it changes after a while from doing the stuff that push all the stars apart, dark energy, to switching mode to pull them all together. So then you have the cyclic universe. And I kind of like the idea of the cyclic universe rather than the one-time shot, because if it's the one-time shot, you have to ask what was before and what was after, and those questions are famous, insoluble philosophical questions.
Right.
So
right.
The cyclic universe to me is more pleasing, but we don't know.
We don't.
And you know what, it's nice to see with the things here. One of the things that I've read is people theorizing that these older red galaxies are what was left over from the universe before the Big Bang banged.
Interesting. Maybe you're right. Maybe they're right. I don't know.
That's right. Who knows?
Right.
And to me, I think it's wonderful to be who knows. Yes, sir.
How soon will this new information be available?
Oh, they're saying maybe 6 months. At least
Okay.
the what those galaxies contain using the spectrometer on the web.
Because that should be a good clue as to whether we need to start questioning the Big Bang or not.
Right, because if it turns out if they have this complicated mix of elements, then it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah. It's going to be very interesting. Another web wow moment.
Yes. And we've had a lot of wow moments already.
We have.
Okay. Continuing along, this time the biology story. I could have had this in another place. I still have the problem many times with these stories is how do you categorize them? Because so many of the stories now really are multidisciplines and affect many different areas. So since I try to categorize them in neat categories, the stories don't fit any neat categories I've been able to develop. So I put this in biology today. And so rare earths are a group of 17 chemically similar materials that occur in low concentrations. That's why they call them rare earths. And it turns out they're indispensable in modern technology for a lot of different reasons. And so the demand for them has increased steadily over the past few decades and is predicted to continue to rise. And as a result of their rarity and the demand, now they are expensive or quite expensive. And right now, China has a near monopoly on the mining of rare earth elements. But a few months ago, there was an announcement of a giant find in Sweden. So maybe China doesn't have or not always going to have the monopoly on the material. But what these scientists were trying to establish was some way in which they could make a circular economy with these rare earth elements, and that means recycling them. And so some German scientists have shown that we can recycle them, and there are some exotic photosynthetic cyanobacteria that can effectively absorb these rare earth elements from wastewater instead of from mining or these other sources. And they can use the wastewater from industrial processes or recycling of waste. So we have a lot of waste. And that after these bacteria absorb the rare earth elements, they can then wash it from the biomass and reuse the bacteria again. And so the cyanobacteria could be used in the future in eco-friendly processes for simultaneous rare earth element recovery and water treatment for industrial wastewater. So you can do two things at once. I always like it when some solution can solve two problems at once. I think that makes it a lot higher probability to come about. And to find this, they looked at a number of cyanobacteria from unusual environments, specialized habitats like arid soils in the Namibian desert and the surface of lichens around the world, and crevices in rocks in South Africa, or polluted brooks in Switzerland. And picking these from the variety of sources, they found a number of uncharacterized new species, and one they found had the highest capacity for bioabsorption in the four of the rare earth elements they tested from water. And what they found was that it had excellent absorption characteristics, and they found the mechanism of the absorption, which means that it's going to give them more ways to look for more bacteria that they can do it. And the mechanism was a high concentration of negatively charged sugar molecules. So they found the bacterial trick that was involved in this recycling. And I think that's going to open the door to other cyanobacteria or perhaps non-bacterial processes to accomplish the same thing. And what they found is the absorption is possible even at low concentrations of the metal, and it's also fast. Most of the absorption happens in 5 minutes. So it's a fast process, and they expect their system is going to become economically feasible in the near future, and this will become a source for rare earth elements that becomes used as the prices go up. Then it's easier to figure out how to pay for a new technology to get them. Once they have the new technology ironed out and in volume production, then I assume the cost will continue to drop. And so I like this because I have felt for some time that there have to be a number of biological solutions to the crude ways that we're presently using to extract resources. And this sounds like such a good trick to me. So good work, scientists. Beep, you can wake up now. And the humanity story this week is not so much about humankind, but womankind. And, I think progress for women is one of the things that will save the world, and progress for girls leads to progress for women. And it's 10 years now since the first International Day of the Girl. And so the writers of this article then looked at how the world has changed for girls in the last 10 years. And there are 6 ways that they found. First, more girls are completing secondary schools today than a year ago. And this is particularly important because girls going through secondary education is one of the most transformative development strategies for a country. Girls who complete secondary school are less likely to be married in childhood and fall pregnant in adolescence, and are more likely to increase their lifetime earnings. So this is a big boost. Right now, worldwide, nearly 1 in 5 girls are not completing lower secondary, and 4 in 10, almost half, are not completing upper secondary. So there's still a lot of progress that has to be made in that area, but they're making headway. Fewer adolescent girls are having children. The adolescents having children, maternal conditions are the second leading cause of death among adolescent girls, and babies born to adolescent mothers are at a higher risk of problems. And so worldwide, adolescent birth rate has fallen from 51 per 1,000 to 42 births per 1,000 adolescent girl. So there's a drop of about 25%. So that's significant. And the progress has also been observed in the least developed countries, but still in these countries, adolescent birth rate is twice the global average. So work has to be done. Family planning access has increased, but it's still not increased much. In the 10 years, access has only increased by 5 percentage points from 55% to 60%. So it's going up, but slow. It turns out one of the things I didn't realize is that adolescent girls are the population with the highest rate of new HIV infections. But those have fallen by 33% in the last decade. The main drivers of the HIV epidemic are gender inequalities, which disadvantage girls, early and forced marriage, gender-based violence, and unequal access to service, and a lack of negotiating power and economic autonomy. Fewer child marriages happen today, but it still is going on a lot. And female genital mutilation has declined over the last decade. And in the 31 countries where this is still a big practice, the rate dropped from 41% of the adolescent girls to 34%. So there's a drop. It still happens for a third of them in these 31 countries, but attitudes towards female genital mutilation in these countries are shifting, which is going to provide momentum towards elimination of the practice in the future. So there is some headway in the girls. I'm particularly pleased with the headway in the increasing of secondary education. But if you look at it with 4 out of 10 adolescent girls in places like India not completing secondary education, there's still an enormous amount of work to be done. Comments from you guys? I know we don't have much in the way of adolescent girl audience here, unless you're hiding something.
Well, I mean, look at Afghanistan and Iran right now, and it's like, it's such the opposite as far as any benefits or anything for women. So
yes.
they're the exact opposite of your story.
Yes. Now, I was raised by a single mom most of my years of childhood. And because of that, I have no doubt about the power and competency of women.
Right.
And
it was really a good news story, but like you said, there's so much work to do.
yes. Okay. And the last story is just for us, not for you guys, because you're some of the ones that have the wisdom. But for dummies like me, then this is for me. A leading cardiologist has revealed 10 heart systems that you should never ignore. But a recent survey found that more than half of adults wouldn't guess these symptoms were related to poor heart health. So more than half of them who have these dangerous symptoms don't do anything about them. And they say an adult with a healthy heart should be able to run up 2 flights of stairs without getting out of breath, and they should be able to squat on a toilet. I know I can squat on a toilet okay. I'm not sure about the 2 flights without getting short of breath. And a healthy adult should be able to hold their breath comfortably for 20 seconds. I'm not going to ask you to try that, but that's the case. And we often ignore our heart health and its signals until it's too late, says the doctor of cardiology. The poll also found out that 1 in 5 adults have reported feeling dizzy after standing up too quickly, and 11% have experienced chest pains or chest tightness. And when they look at the details underneath this, about 90% of the people who experience these things write them off for some reason or another, saying they're the symptoms of different things, or they just don't see them as serious, or they don't want to be seen as melodramatic, so they don't talk to anyone about them, and or consider themselves just too young to have such heart issues. And so a number of people experience these problems, and in this group, 90% ignore them for one reason or another. And warning signs like chest tightness, aches in your arms, especially your left arm, or jaw, dizziness on standing. These are wake-up calls that your heart is calling out for help. So this is the list of things to not ignore. So pay attention. Don't ignore this list about things not to ignore. The first is dizziness on standing up quickly. Had that? No, I haven't had that. Shortness of breath. We all know about that one as a problem. And it turns out that's a problem. The next is difficulty bending down. And I'm not sure what that is about and what that's related to, how that's related to the heart. Palpitations of the heart, that's one we've heard of. Tightness of the chest, that's one we've all heard of. Arm pain, often on the left, I think that's one we've heard of. Certainly I'm aware of that one. I did have arm pain in my left arm for a few minutes a couple of days ago, and after reading this article, and I was wondering, am I having problems with my heart? Of course, I didn't do anything about it.
Right, you ignored it.
That's right. That's exactly correct. And hope that it would go away, and it did. Difficulty standing up. I think that is kind of the inverse of the difficulty bending down. Chest discomfort excluding tightness. Swollen legs. I know about swollen legs and ankles. For me, swollen ankles, my wife noticing that I had swollen ankles, she was smart enough to get me to a cardiologist. And within a few days, I was having a stent installed in my heart. So that was a good signal. And then frequent extra or skipped heartbeats. So these are different forms of a regular heartbeat. So let me go through it again. Difficulty, dizziness on standing up quickly, shortness of breath, difficulty bending down, heart palpitations, tightness of the chest, arm pain, difficulty standing up, chest discomfort, swollen legs, extra or skipped heartbeats. So if you have any of those and they persist longer than they did for the few minutes that I had yesterday, then get your ass down to your doctor and tell them, okay? Promise me, I don't want anybody to die. I can't afford to lose more participants.
However, I've had a couple of experiences, and this is why I think a lot of people, men in particular, don't go to the doctor when these things come up. So I had a rash on my stomach, a rash. And my wife talked me into going to the doctor to see what was going on. Well, after a night in the hospital, because all of these are symptoms that could be related to your heart. And the doctors aren't taking any chances when you go in and complain about one of these symptoms. So I spent the night in the hospital over that, and a lot of stress tests and whatever, found out nothing wrong. Another time I had indigestion and also a symptom of possible heart problem. And I go in and come to and end up spending the night in the hospital, and they found that it was indigestion. And so that's why, every time I get dizzy when I stand up quickly, that might be due to my blood pressure, not my heart attack, not having a heart attack. So something else that I want to complain about this study, it did not factor in age. And when you get older, you're going to have some of these symptoms just because of your age. And if you go to the doctor every time you have one of these symptoms, you're going to spend a lot of time in the doctor's office and a lot of wasted time, I think.
Sure, I understand that. I understand that. I do also understand from my own standpoint that my wife noticing one of these symptoms and getting on my case and sending me to the doctor's shop was exactly the right thing to do. And without somebody else telling me to do it, I wouldn't have done it. And probably I wouldn't be doing the broadcast today because I can't do it from the other side. There's not much internet connectivity.
A non-believer.
So anyway, the things to pay attention to, I certainly know what you're talking about. And like a lot of men, I'm reluctant to go to the doctor. I have had 2 cases, though, when since we've come to Mexico, that going to the doctor was valuable and certainly saved what could have been greater problems later. One of them was where I needed the stent installed, and another one is where I had chest pain, and the chest pain I thought was a kidney stone forming or something, and it was a blood clot in one of my lungs. And the blood clot in your lungs are also things that people die from. And I'm not ready.
No, we're not ready for you to leave it.
No.
Okay. So anyway, that's what we have for today. I do also just want to say that though it looks like we have a small crowd on Zoom, still the average is about 50 people a week watch the YouTubes that I produce from this. So we have a lot bigger crowd watching them than we're aware of.
Should we selectively encourage people to join in?
Yeah, absolutely.
New people.
Love it. Love it.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me today, and we'll see you next week. And I hope, Daryl, by next week, you will show us something new and wonderful from our universe.
Right. Better than the web.
Better than the web. That's right. Because it's from the backyard Nahia.
That's right.
We didn't need the web. We didn't need the web.
That's right.
Anyway. Anyway, adios, friends.
Okay, thanks.